This message does not arrive by accident, and it does not come softly. Archangel Michael steps forward with urgency because something has already shifted in the spiritual realm around you. A line hath been crossed. A move hath been made. And the unsettling truth is this: it did not come from a stranger. It came from someone close enough to know you, close enough to observe you, close enough to feel threatened by what God has placed on your life. While you were focused on surviving, growing, or simply staying faithful, a quiet decision was made behind the scenes, one that carried spiritual weight. And now heaven is watching you, not in fear but in expectation, because what you do next will determine how this unfolds. Understand this clearly from the beginning. This is not about panic, and it is not about paranoia. This is about awareness. In the spiritual realm, actions are not always loud. They are often subtle, disguised as thoughts, words, intentions, or prayers that are not pure. Someone close to you released something, whether knowingly or unknowingly, that was meant to interfere, delay, weaken, or redirect what God is doing in your life. And the reason this message is coming now is because that action reached a level where divine attention was required. Heaven does not intervene in every human emotion, but it does respond when spiritual lines are crossed. Archangel Michael is not coming to tell you that you are defeated. He is coming to tell you that you are observed, protected, and tested. The move that was made against you did not succeed the way it was intended to, but it did trigger a moment of decision. In the courts of heaven, moments like this matter deeply. Not because God is unsure of you, but because your response carries authority. You are not being judged for what was done to you. You are being watched for how you will carry yourself now that it has been revealed. There is a reason the message emphasizes someone close. Betrayal, spiritual interference, or hidden opposition only works when access exists. This is why the wind feels confusing rather than obvious. You may have felt a shift recently, an emotional heaviness, a strange distance, a sense that something was off but you couldn't name it. That was not imagination. That was discernment awakening. The spiritual realm reacted before your mind could understand it, and now clarity is being released so you do not respond blindly. Heaven is watching because this moment is a fork in the road. One path leads to unnecessary spiritual warfare, emotional exhaustion, and delayed outcomes. The other leads to divine reversal, protection, and accelerated clarity. The difference between the two paths is not what the other person does next. It is what you do. This is why Archangel Michael is stepping in early. He is a warrior, but he is also a guardian of divine order. His presence signals that protection is already active, but instruction is required. You must understand the seriousness without slipping into fear. Fear is not the correct response, and heaven is not looking for it. Reaction, confrontation, revenge, or emotional exposure are not what is being weighed right now. What heaven is watching is your restraint, your alignment, and your trust. There are moments when silence speaks louder than words in the spiritual realm, and moments when prayer carries more force than explanation. This is one of those moments. This message matters because what was intended to work against you can actually work for you, if you respond correctly. Spiritual moves do not exist in isolation. They create consequences, but they also create opportunities for God to demonstrate authority. The enemy often overplays their hand when they sense destiny accelerating, and what was meant to destabilize ends up positioning you for protection and elevation. That is why this revelation is coming before visible consequences unfold. Archangel Michael is making one thing clear. You are not late, you are not unaware, and you are not alone. The timing of this message is precise. Heaven did not wait until damage was done. Heaven waited until your awareness was strong enough to handle the truth without breaking. That alone should tell you something about where you are spiritually right now. You are being trusted with insight that requires maturity. Do not rush to label people. Do not rush to accuse. This is not a call to sever ties impulsively or to confront emotionally. This is a call to pause, to listen, and to align. The spiritual realm responds to posture before it responds to words. And right now, heaven is leaning in, watching to see whether you will respond from fear or from faith, from emotion or from wisdom, from the flesh or from the spirit. This is why the title of this message is not symbolic. It is literal. A moon was made. Heaven took note. And the outcome has not been finalized yet. Your next step, how you pray, how you speak, how you restrain yourself, how you trust God, will tip the scales. This is not pressure meant to overwhelm you. It is authority being handed to you. Few people realize how powerful their responses are in moments like this. Fewer still are warned in advance. So receive this message with clarity, not alarm. You are being protected, not exposed. You are being guided, not threatened. And as this unfolds, you will begin to understand why Archangel Michael came first, before conflict, before loss, before confusion, so that what was meant to move against you would instead reveal who truly stands with you and who does not. Before anything was revealed, before this message reached you, your spirit already felt it. That is how these things often work. The spiritual realm moves first, and the soul feels the echo before the mind can explain it. You may have noticed subtle but persistent changes, your peace disturbed without a clear reason, your thoughts heavier than usual, your energy drained after interactions that once felt normal. These were not random moods. These were signals. When a move is made against you in the spiritual realm, it rarely announces itself loudly. It slips in quietly, hoping you will doubt yourself instead of discerning the truth. One of the first signs is confusion that doesn't match your circumstances. You may have asked yourself why simple decisions suddenly felt complicated, or why clarity seemed just out of reach. This kind of confusion is not the same as stress. It feels foreign, intrusive, like mental fog that settles without permission. That fog is often the residue of someone else's intention colliding with your spiritual atmosphere. When the source is someone close, it is harder to detect, because your guard is naturally down. Familiarity creates access, and access creates influence. Another sign is emotional heaviness that appears without a trigger. You may have felt sadness, irritation, or anxiety rise suddenly, especially after thinking about or interacting with a specific person, even if nothing outwardly negative occurred. This happens when spiritual tension exists beneath the surface. The spirit picks up what the eyes cannot see. Your emotional response was not weakness, it was sensitivity. You were sensing a misalignment that had not yet been exposed. You may also have experienced a strange sense of distance, either from that person or within yourself. Conversations that once flowed easily may have felt strained, hollow, or oddly performative. Laughter didn't land the same way. Trust felt thinner, even if you couldn't explain why. That is often a sign that spiritual unity has been disrupted. When intentions shift, connection follows. And when someone close allows jealousy, resentment, comparison, or hidden offense to grow, it creates a silent fracture that the spiritual realm recognizes immediately. Another overlooked sign is an increase in self-doubt that feels uncharacteristic. You may have questioned your worth, your calling, or your direction more than usual, even though nothing in your external life justified it. That kind of doubt does not originate in truth. It often comes from external spiritual pressure attempting to weaken your confidence. When someone releases negative intention through words, thoughts, or even misaligned prayers, it seeks to destabilize identity first. If identity shakes, purpose slows. That is the strategy. Pay close attention to the timing of these feelings. Did they intensify after a breakthrough, a moment of growth, or a decision to move forward? That is rarely coincidence. Spiritual interference often increases when momentum builds. When someone close notices your light intensifying, and they have not dealt with their own shadows, discomfort can turn into resistance. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but intention, even unspoken, still carries weight. You may have also felt an unusual urge to withdraw, isolate, or go quiet, not from wisdom, but from exhaustion. This is different from healthy rest. This feels like spiritual fatigue, as though you are carrying more than you should. It happens when something is pressing against you in the unseen. The goal is not always to destroy. Sometimes it is simply to slow you down long enough for doubt to settle in. That is why awareness matters so much right now. Understand this clearly. Noticing these signs does not mean you are under constant attack. It means you are spiritually alert. The enemy prefers ignorance, not confrontation. And the fact that you are recognizing these patterns means the move that was made did not fully land. It was detected. That alone shifts power back into your hands. This is why it is important that you do not dismiss what you felt. Do not minimize it. Do not explain it away just to keep peace on the surface. Spiritual peace is deeper than surface harmony. It is alignment. And alignment sometimes requires truth before comfort. This message is not here to create suspicion. It is here to restore clarity. If this resonates with you so far, take a moment to engage with this message. Like this video, share it with someone who may be feeling the same unexplainable weight, and subscribe to the channel so you stay connected to messages of protection, discernment, and spiritual clarity. When you comment, you are not just engaging with content. You are declaring awareness, and awareness itself is a form of spiritual alignment. You are not imagining things. You are not overly sensitive. And you are not alone in this moment. These signs were the early indicators, the quiet alarms that something had shifted. Now that it have been brought into the light, the purpose is not fear, it is preparation. Because when awareness rises, influence breaks. And what happens next depends on how you carry this understanding forward. What was done against you did not begin in the physical world, which is why it felt confusing, indirect, and difficult to explain. In the spiritual realm, moves are often made long before consequences appear on the surface. A spiritual move is not always a ritual or something dramatic. More often, it begins as an intention that is allowed to grow unchecked. It can be jealousy that turns into silent comparison, offense that turns into resentment, or words spoken repeatedly in private that carry frustration, bitterness, or rivalry. These things may sound small, but in the spiritual realm, repetition gives power. What someone nurtures internally eventually releases externally, even if they never say your name out loud. The move made against you came through proximity. That is why it mattered. Someone close to you had access not just to your presence, but to your seasons. They watched you when you struggled, when you rose, when you changed. And somewhere along the way, instead of guarding their heart, they allowed a misalignment to form. That misalignment became an opening. When thoughts are rehearsed long enough, they become declarations. When declarations are repeated long enough, they become assignments. This is how spiritual interference begins, not always with intent to destroy, but with failure to surrender emotions to God. In some cases, The move against you may have come through prayer that was not clean. Prayer spoken from wounded pride, hidden envy, or a desire to control outcomes carries a different tone in the spiritual realm. Heaven discerns motive before it responds to words. When prayer is rooted in comparison instead of compassion, it does not rise the way the speaker expects. Instead, it exposes the heart of the one praying and triggers divine scrutiny. This is one reason Archangel Michael stepped forward, not to accuse, but to bear witness. When spiritual lines are crossed, witnesses are assigned. You need to understand something important here. Not every spiritual move is authorized. Many attempts never receive permission to proceed. They are intercepted, weighed, and neutralized before they reach their target. That is what happened here. What was released toward you did not gain full access, but it did reach the threshold where heaven took note. This is why you felt disturbance without devastation, pressure without collapse, confusion without loss. Protection was already active, even before you understood why you needed it. The person who made this move may not fully realize what they did. Spiritual actions do not always require full awareness. The spiritual realm responds to what is cultivated, not what is confessed publicly. This is why God warns His people to guard their hearts. A guarded heart protects not only the one who carries it, but those around them. An unguarded heart, especially in close relationships, can unintentionally release harm. This does not excuse the action, but it explains why heaven responded with observation rather than immediate judgment. Archangel Michael's presence here is not random. He is assigned when protection, truth, and order must be upheld. His role is not emotional, it is authoritative. He steps in when spiritual integrity is being tested. The moment this move was made, a record was created, not to condemn you, and not even primarily to condemn the other person, but to establish accountability. Heaven is watching because this moment is instructional. It reveals character, alignment, and spiritual maturity. Your role in this moment is not to investigate or retaliate. It is to remain aligned. The greatest mistake people make when spiritual interference is revealed is reacting from emotion. Reaction feeds what was meant to distract you. Response, on the other hand, starves it. Prayer rooted in peace carries more authority than confrontation rooted in hurt. Silence guided by wisdom carries more power than explanation fueled by fear. Heaven is watching which language you choose to speak, fear or faith, offense or obedience. This is also why you were not told immediately. Timing matters in the spiritual realm. Revelation before readiness can cause unnecessary damage. Revelation at the right moment produces authority. You are receiving this now because you are capable of handling it without losing yourself. That alone should reassure you. God does not expose unless He also equips. He does not allow awareness unless He has already provided covering. What was meant to work quietly against you has now been brought into the light. Light does not panic. Light reveals, heals, and corrects. And as this truth settles in, understand this. The power has already shifted. Awareness changes outcomes. Alignment seals protection. And obedience invites intervention. Hold on to that because what comes next carries weight. You'll be glad you stayed for what's about to be revealed. Type I stand aligned in the comments if this resonates with you. Lesson code 444 is now activated. This is the moment where the light you just received must keep moving forward, because there are souls right now walking in confusion who need this same warning and protection. I hear the Spirit saying, as you have received freely, now let the river flow through you. When you release support through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are not funding a channel. You are sowing light into places where darkness has been working quietly. I am speaking to those who feel the fire in this message stirring their spirit. This is your invitation to act. Just as heaven watched your response, heaven also watches obedience in giving. Your seed becomes oil that keeps this prophetic voice reaching those who are unaware but chosen. You it now. Support the work through the links in the description or the PayPal QR code on the screen. And I declare that what you release will return multiplied in clarity, protection, and peace. Heaven is not watching you because it doubts you. Heaven is watching you because this moment carries weight. There are seasons when God moves on behalf of His people quietly, without requiring much from them except trust. And then there are moments like this, moments of intersection, where a human response becomes part of the divine process. This is one of those moments. What unfolded in the spiritual realm drew attention not because of the strength of the move made against you, but because of the authority resting on your next decision. When Archangel Michael stands watch, it is never casual. His presence signals that order, truth, and justice are being upheld. Heaven is attentive right now because your response will either close a door permanently or allow unnecessary spiritual noise to linger. This is not about punishment or reward in a simple sense. It is about alignment. Alignment determines access, and access determines outcome. You may wonder why the focus is not on correcting the other person, exposing them, or stopping their actions directly. The reason is simple and profound. Heaven governs through order, not reaction. God does not rush to dismantle every misaligned intention immediately. Instead, He watches how His children carry themselves when tested. This is how authority is revealed. Anyone can remain faithful when nothing is pressing against them. But when pressure arrives quietly, through someone close, your response becomes testimony. Heaven is watching whether you choose to react emotionally or respond spiritually. Reaction is fast, loud, and often driven by the need to defend oneself. Response is slower, quieter, and rooted in trust. Reaction demands control. Response releases control to God. And in the spiritual realm, releasing control is not weakness, it is confidence. It signals that you understand who truly governs outcomes. Another reason heaven is watching is because restraint carries enormous spiritual power. Many people underestimate restraint because it does not feel active. But restraint is an action. Choosing not to speak prematurely, choosing not to accuse without instruction, choosing not to act out of wounded pride. These choices register in the spiritual realm. They create spiritual covering. They invite divine advocacy. When you restrain yourself, you leave room for God to move without interference. This moment is also a measure of spiritual maturity. God does not expose deeper truths to those who are not ready to carry them without misusing them. The fact that this was revealed to you means you are being trusted. Trust from heaven is not given lightly. It is given when a person has shown consistency, humility, and a willingness to obey even when obedience is uncomfortable. Heaven is watching to see if you will honor that trust. There is also a legal aspect to this moment. In the spiritual realm, accusation and defense operate according to order. When someone makes a move fueled by misalignment, it opens a case. But cases are not decided by emotion. They are decided by evidence, posture, and authority. Your response becomes part of the record. This is why heaven waits. Not because God is slow, but because timing ensures justice without collateral damage. You may feel an urge to explain yourself, to clear your name, or to confront what feels unfair. That urge is understandable. But heaven is watching whether you will let God be your defender. Scripture is clear. When God defends, no argument is required. When he speaks, clarity follows. When he exposes, it is complete and undeniable. Acting prematurely can interrupt that process. Waiting in obedience protects it. Heaven is also watching because what you are learning now will prepare you for what comes next. This moment is not isolated. It is connected to future responsibility. People who are entrusted with influence, leadership, or spiritual authority are often tested in private first. How you handle unseen opposition determines how you will handle visible responsibility. This is not about proving yourself to others. It is about being refined for what lies ahead. There is something else that must be said clearly. Heaven is not watching you with condemnation. It is watching you with intention. God already knows your heart. This observation is not for his information. It is for your formation. You are being shaped, strengthened, and positioned. Even this uncomfortable awareness is part of preparation. Nothing here is wasted. If you feel the weight of being observed, do not interpret it as pressure to perform. Interpret it as an invitation to trust more deeply. God is not asking you to get this perfect. He's asking you to stay aligned. Alignment does not require brilliance. It requires obedience. It requires listening more than speaking, praying more than reacting, and trusting more than controlling. As this part closes, remember this. Heaven watches not to intimidate, but to intervene at the right moment. You are not alone in this. You are being guided. And as long as you remain anchored in truth, humility, and faith, the outcome will not be decided by what was done against you, but by what God does through you. What you are facing right now is not just a response to what someone else did. It is a test, quiet, precise, and deeply spiritual. And like most divine tests, it does not announce itself clearly at first. It disguises itself as discomfort, disappointment, or confusion. But make no mistake, this moment was permitted not to break you, but to measure something within you that cannot be measured any other way. The test is not about whether you were hurt. Heaven already knows that pain is a natural response. The test is about what you do with that pain. Will you let it harden into bitterness, or will you surrender it before it takes root? Betrayal is one of the most effective tools the enemy uses because it tempts the heart to close. But God allows it at times because it reveals what truly governs you: emotion or obedience, reaction or trust. This test exists because something in your life is advancing. Tests do not come to stagnant places. They appear when movement is happening, when growth is real, when destiny is active. You were not targeted because you are weak. You were tested because you are carrying something valuable. And heaven needed to know how you would steward it under pressure. One of the greatest deceptions about betrayal is the belief that it is meant to stop you. Often, it is meant to expose what cannot go with you into the next season. God does not always remove people abruptly. Sometimes he allows situations to reveal where alignment no longer exists. The test is whether you will try to force alignment where God is allowing separation, or whether you will trust him to reorder your relationships without resentment. This test also examines your need for control. Betrayal creates a strong desire to manage outcomes, to explain, confront, defend, or correct. But God is watching whether you can release control and allow him to handle what you cannot. Surrender is not passive. It is an active decision to trust God's justice over your own timing. When you surrender control, you step out of God's way. And when God is not obstructed, he moves with precision. Another layer of this test is forgiveness. Not forced forgiveness, not performative forgiveness, but genuine release. Forgiveness does not mean access is restored. It does not mean trust is automatic. Forgiveness means you refuse to carry what does not belong to you. Heaven watches closely in moments like this because forgiveness frees you while justice remains God's responsibility. When you forgive correctly, you do not excuse the action. You release yourself from its grip. This test also exposes how you view yourself. Betrayal often triggers self-questioning. Was I too open? Too trusting? Too kind? These questions can quietly erode identity if left unchecked. But heaven is watching whether you will reinterpret this moment through shame or through wisdom. Discernment is not the same as suspicion. Growth is not the same as regret. You are not being asked to become guarded in fear, but to become wise in love. There is also a test of patience here. God's timing rarely aligns with our emotional urgency. You may want resolution now, clarity now, answers now. But heaven is watching whether you can wait without becoming cynical. Waiting in faith is one of the highest expressions of trust. It says, I believe God sees what I cannot, and I trust Him to act when it will cause the least harm and the greatest good. This test is not indefinite. It has boundaries. God does not prolong testing unnecessarily, but He does complete what He begins. The purpose of this test is refinement, not exhaustion. And once the lesson is secured, movement follows. Outcomes shift. Doors close or open, and clarity arrives without chaos. You must also understand that passing this test does not mean you will never feel anger, sadness, or disappointment again. It means those emotions will no longer control your decisions. Emotional honesty is not failure. Emotional dominance is. Heaven is watching whether emotions are acknowledged and surrendered, or rehearsed and empowered. This moment is shaping how you will respond to future opposition. What you learn here will save you later. Many people fail at higher levels because they never learned restraint at lower ones. You are learning now how to stay centered when misunderstood, how to remain aligned when misrepresented, and how to trust God when outcomes are delayed. These are not small lessons. They are foundations. As this test unfolds, remind yourself of this truth. God does not test to discover weakness. He tests to reveal strength. And even when betrayal feels personal, its purpose is often instructional. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. And when this test is complete, you will not just move forward. You will move forward lighter, clearer, and more firmly anchored in who God has called you to be. Before you ever sensed that something was wrong, protection was already in motion. That is the part most people never see. In the spiritual realm, defense often activates before danger becomes visible. Archangel Michael does not wait for damage to occur before he moves. He responds to authorization, to covenant, to divine instruction. And long before this interference reached your awareness, a shield was already positioned around you. This is why the attack did not manifest the way it was intended to. This is why confusion did not turn into collapse, why pressure did not become destruction, and why the weight you felt never fully consumed you. You were covered. Archangel Michael's shield is not symbolic. It represents enforced boundaries in the spiritual realm, lines that cannot be crossed without consequence. What was sent toward you met resistance. It was filtered, weakened, and contained. Many people misunderstand spiritual protection. They assume protection means nothing negative will ever attempt to approach them. That is not how it works. Protection means what approaches you does not have authority over you. It means interference cannot rewrite your destiny. It means intention does not become outcome without permission. The shield does not remove all tension, but it prevents penetration. Archangel Michael's role is not to eliminate every challenge, but to ensure order is upheld. When someone close to you released something misaligned, it triggered protocol. But protocol did not result in chaos. It resulted in observation, interception, and containment. This is why the situation did not spiral. Heaven allowed awareness, not damage. Pressure, not loss. Testing, not defeat. There were moments you may have felt unusually tired, withdrawn, or quiet. That was not weakness. That was covering. When protection intensifies, the soul often pulls inward. God creates space around you so external noise cannot overwhelm what He is preserving. This inward pull was not isolation. It was insulation. It limited access while clarity was being prepared. Archangel Michael's shield also works through delay. Some conversations were postponed. Some plans slowed. Some reactions were restrained. What felt frustrating in the moment was actually mercy. Had things moved faster, exposure could have happened prematurely, causing unnecessary fallout. The shield slowed time so wisdom could catch up with awareness. It is important to understand that protection does not always feel comforting. Sometimes it feels restrictive. You may have wondered why you didn't feel like engaging, explaining, or confronting. That restraint was not suppression. It was guidance. The shield works by reducing impulsive action. It protects not only you, but everyone involved, by preventing irreversible decisions made under emotional pressure. Another way this shield operates is by redirecting outcomes. What was meant to confuse you was redirected into discernment. What was meant to drain you was redirected into rest. What was meant to isolate you was redirected into deeper alignment with God. This redirection is one of the clearest signs of Archangel Michael's involvement. When attacks backfire into clarity, protection is active. There were also unseen interventions you never noticed, words you never heard, opportunities that quietly dissolve, influences that lost power without explanation. These were not coincidences. They were enforced boundaries. When protection is active, not everything needs to be dramatic. Sometimes the greatest defense is subtle removal. You may still feel a sense of tension lingering, and that does not mean the shield has weakened. It means the situation is still being resolved. Protection remains active throughout the process, not just at the beginning. Archangel Michael does not abandon a post halfway through. Once assigned, he remains until order is restored and the lesson is complete. It is also important to recognize that this shield responds to your posture. Alignment strengthens protection. Prayer strengthens it. Obedience reinforces it. Every time you choose restraint over reaction, trust over control, peace over accusation, the shield becomes more effective. Heaven responds to cooperation. Protection is not passive, it is relational. This is why you are being encouraged to remain calm, grounded, and prayerful. Not because you are in danger, but because you are in transition. The shield is guarding you as clarity unfolds. It is preventing interference from shaping the narrative. It is ensuring that when resolution comes, it comes cleanly, without regret. Archangel Michael's shield also signals something hopeful. You are valued. Protection is a sign where purpose exists. Heaven does not deploy guardians where nothing is at stake. The level of defense corresponds to the level of calling. This moment is confirming, not questioning, your significance. As you move forward, remember this truth. You are not exposed. You are covered. You are not vulnerable. You are guided. And even now, as you listen, the shield remains in place, steady, enforced, and unwavering, until everything that was meant to unsettle you is fully brought back into divine order. There are moments in life when power feels loud, when it shows itself through action, influence, or visible authority. But the power you hold right now is different. It is quiet, restrained, and deeply spiritual. It does not announce itself, yet it carries the ability to shift outcomes in ways you cannot yet see. This power is not something you need to earn or activate. It is already in your hands because of where you are positioned in this moment. The greatest misconception about power is that it always looks like doing something. In the spiritual realm, power often looks like choosing not to. Choosing not to speak when words would inflame. Choosing not to act when impulse demands movement. Choosing not to explain yourself when God has not released you to do so. These choices are not passive. They are authoritative. They demonstrate trust in a higher order of justice. Right now, your power lies in alignment. Alignment with God's will creates leverage in the spiritual realm. When your heart, mind, and actions move together in obedience, resistance loses traction. What was meant to destabilize you cannot gain ground when you are anchored. That anchoring is happening now, even if it feels uncomfortable. Discomfort often accompanies strengthening. Another form of power you hold is discernment. Discernment is not suspicion. It is clarity without paranoia. You are not being asked to scan every relationship with fear, but you are being invited to see clearly without denial. Discernment allows you to adjust boundaries without accusation, to create distance without drama, and to move forward without carrying resentment. That is power. You also hold the power of restraint. Restraint is one of the rarest and most misunderstood forms of authority. Anyone can react. Very few can pause. Heaven responds strongly to restraint because it reflects trust. When you restrain yourself, you declare that you believe God is capable of handling what you cannot. The declaration is not ignored. Prayer is another dimension of your power right now, but not frantic prayer, not defensive prayer, and not prayer fueled by fear. What carries authority in this season is prayer rooted in peace. Quiet prayers, honest prayers, prayers that say, God, I place this in your hands, and actually mean it. These prayers move more than emotional declarations ever could. You also hold power in how you interpret this moment. If you interpret this as betrayal meant to destroy you, you will move from a place of defense. If you interpret it as a test meant to prepare you, you will move from a place of growth. Heaven is watching which interpretation you choose, because it determines what you release next. Another form of power you hold is patience. Patience is not waiting without purpose. It is waiting with intention. It is choosing not to rush outcomes that God is still shaping. When you exercise patience, you prevent premature conclusions. You allow truth to surface naturally. And when truth surfaces on its own, it cannot be argued with. Your power also lies in obedience to subtle instruction. Not every directive from God arrives loudly. Sometimes it comes as a gentle nudge to rest, to step back, to observe, or to remain silent. Obeying these subtle instructions strengthens your spiritual authority. Ignoring them weakens it. Right now, obedience in small things is shaping outcomes in larger ones. It is important to understand that this power is time-sensitive. That does not mean you must rush. It means this season will not last forever. The choices you make now will not need to be made again in the same way later. This is a defining window. Not because everything depends on perfection, but because consistency matters. Heaven is watching patterns, not isolated moments. You may feel pressure to prove something, to yourself or to others. That pressure does not come from God. God does not require proof, He requires trust. You do not need to demonstrate strength. You need to remain anchored. Strength will be evident in time, without announcement. Another aspect of your power is faith and unseen resolution. Faith is not denial of reality. It is confidence in God's governance. Choosing to believe that God is working even when you cannot see how is a powerful stance. It deprives fear of influence. It keeps your heart open while your spirit remains guarded. As this part closes, understand this clearly. You are not powerless in this situation. You are positioned. You are equipped. And you are being invited to exercise a form of power that shapes outcomes quietly, steadily, and effectively. What you choose to release, what you choose to restrain, and what you choose to trust will echo beyond this moment. And heaven is paying attention, not because it doubts you, but because it recognizes the authority you are learning to carry. This is the moment where the path divides clearly, and Archangel Michael speaks with both warning and assurance. Not to frighten you, but to ground you. Because what happens next is not random, it is responsive. Heaven responds to posture. The spiritual realm responds to alignment. And right now, your inner stance matters more than any external action. The warning is not about what the other person might do next. That part is already contained. The warning is about what can happen if fear, anger, or wounded pride are allowed to take the lead. When emotions begin to govern decisions, authority leaks. Fear accelerates things that should unfold slowly. Anger invites unnecessary conflict. Pride demands explanation where silence would have preserved peace. These reactions do not feel dangerous in the moment, but in the spiritual realm, they create openings, small ones, but avoidable ones. Responding from fear narrows vision. It makes everything feel urgent, even when patience would have protected you. Responding from anger distorts discernment. It makes you interpret everything through offense instead of truth. Responding from pride isolates you. It convinces you that you must carry the weight alone, instead of letting God defend you. This is the warning. Not every emotion needs to be obeyed. Not every thought needs to be acted on. Not every truth needs to be spoken immediately. But now hear the promise, because it is stronger than the warning. If you respond in faith, quiet, steady, anchored faith, what was meant to destabilize you will reverse direction. Faith does not mean pretending you are unaffected. It means choosing trust over control. When you respond in obedience, heaven accelerates clarity. Confusion lifts. Tension loosens. And what was hidden begins to surface without force. The promise is this. If you remain aligned, God Himself will handle what you cannot. Exposure will come without you having to expose. Separation will happen without you having to sever aggressively. Justice will be executed without you having to demand it. This is how divine authority works. It moves cleanly, without chaos, and without regret. Here is also a promise of peace. Not surface peace, but deep, settling peace. The kind that does not require explanation. The kind that tells you internally, you chose correctly. That peace is a sign that heaven has accepted your response. It is confirmation that protection remains active and outcomes are being adjusted in your favor. Archangel Michael's presence here also carries a promise of reinforcement. You are not expected to navigate this alone. Strength will be renewed. Discernment will sharpen. Emotional clarity will return. What felt heavy will not remain heavy. The season has an end, and it ends in understanding, not confusion. The promise extends further than resolution. It reaches into restoration. Restoration does not always mean relationships return to how they were. Sometimes restoration means your peace is restored, your confidence is restored, your spiritual footing is restored, and that kind of restoration often requires realignment. God removes what drains so he can strengthen what remains. Another part of this promise is protection from repeat cycles. What you are learning now will prevent future interference from landing the same way. Awareness creates boundaries. Wisdom changes access. You are not just being protected from this moment. You are being prepared for what comes next. But all of this hinges on one thing: your response now. Not perfection, not performance, but posture. Heaven is not asking you to be flawless. Heaven is asking you to be faithful. Faithful in restraint. Faithful in prayer. Faithful in trust. As this unfolds, resist the urge to rush to the ending. Let the process complete its work. God's timing is not slow, it is precise. When he moves, it will make sense why waiting was required. And when clarity comes, it will come without the residue of regret. This is the warning: do not step out of alignment by reacting emotionally. This is the promise: if you stay aligned, God will resolve this in ways you could not orchestrate yourself. Hold this truth close, because what comes next brings clarity and peace in ways you may not expect. Type "I choose faith" in the comments if this speaks to you. Blessing code 888 is now activated. As this promise settles into your spirit, hear this clearly: this message is not only for you. It is a light meant to reach others standing at the same crossroads. The Spirit says those who carry the flame must keep the fire burning. When you give through super thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are releasing provision that keeps this prophetic voice moving across the earth. I am speaking directly to those who feel stirred right now. This is not a suggestion. It is an invitation to obedience. Your giving becomes seed in fertile ground, and heaven responds to seeds sown in faith. Act now. Use the links in the description or the PayPal QR code on the screen, and I declare that as you support this work, God will support you with clarity, protection, and divine peace. Right now, there is something important you must understand. The outcome is forming, but it has not been rushed. Heaven is not delayed, and it is not uncertain. It is attentive. This moment exists because resolution is ready, but resolution follows alignment. What happens next is not random, emotional, or chaotic. It is responsive. The spiritual realm responds to posture, not pressure. And your posture in the season is shaping what will be released next. Heaven is ready to act, but it does not move independently of your alignment. This is not because God needs permission, but because he honors order. When you stay grounded in faith, restraint, and obedience, you create a clear channel for divine intervention. When you step into reaction, fear, or emotional control, the channel narrows. The outcome does not disappear, but it becomes heavier, slower, and more complicated than it needs to be. There are two possible outcomes standing in this moment, and neither of them is neutral. One outcome leads to closure with peace. The other leads to resolution through struggle. Heaven is offering you the first, but it will not force it upon you. The difference between these two outcomes is not based on fairness or effort. It is based on alignment. If reaction takes over, if frustration drives decisions, if fear begins interpreting motives, if pride demands explanation, then the outcome becomes delayed, not canceled. Delayed. In that path, clarity still comes, but it arrives through exhaustion. Lessons repeat. Conversations stretch longer than necessary. Emotional weight increases. Nothing is destroyed, but nothing feels cleaner. This is what happens when resolution is forced instead of received. But there is another outcome, and this is the one heaven is prepared to release immediately. When you remain steady, when you pray instead of react, pause instead of confront, and trust instead of control. Divine resolution activates. This kind of outcome does not require confrontation. It does not require exposure driven by emotion. It unfolds naturally. Truth surfaces without force. Misalignment reveals itself without accusation. Distance forms without hostility. And peace settles without explanation. This outcome is quiet, but it is powerful. It does not humiliate. It does not damage surrounding relationships. It does not leave lingering regret. It restores order. And once order is restored, momentum follows. Energy returns. Your action sharpens. You stop replaying the situation in your mind because it no longer has authority over your emotions. Heaven is also ready to release justice, but not human justice. Divine justice is precise. It addresses root issues, not surface behavior. It corrects without cruelty. It separates when necessary and restores when possible. Depending on the situation, justice may look like exposure, or it may look like quiet removal. It may look like accountability, or it may look like distance. Whatever form it takes, it will not require you to fight for it. Another part of the outcome heaven is ready to release is clarity in relationships. Confusion will not linger. You will know who is aligned with you without needing proof. You will sense who is safe without explanation. And you will feel peace about boundaries without guilt. This clarity will not come through analysis. It will come through inner confirmation. When peace leads, confusion cannot stay. This outcome is also connected to what comes next in your life. God does not resolve one chapter without opening space for another. What you are walking through now is not an interruption. It is a transition. Once this situation settles, something new accelerates. Opportunities feel lighter. Decisions feel clear. Your spirit feels unburdened. That is not coincidence. That is preparation completing its work. Heaven is ready to release this outcome because you are showing readiness, not perfection. Readiness. Readiness is revealed through consistency, not intensity. Each time you choose faith over fear, readiness is confirmed. Each time you restrain emotional reaction, readiness is reinforced. Each time you trust God with timing, readiness is sealed. Angels are attentive in this moment because instruction is pending. In the spiritual realm, movement waits for confirmation. That confirmation does not come through words spoken to others. It comes through obedience lived quietly. When your posture remains aligned, heaven moves without resistance. If this message is bringing clarity, take a moment to respond. Like this video so this truth reaches others who are facing similar spiritual crossroads. Share it with someone who may be struggling silently. Subscribe to the channel so you remain connected to messages that protect, prepare, and strengthen your discernment. Your engagement is not passive. It helps release understanding where it is urgently needed. As this part closes, hear this clearly. The outcome is not something you must chase, force, or manipulate. It is already prepared. Heaven is ready to release it. Your role is simply to remain aligned so it can arrive without distortion, without regret, and without unnecessary struggle. Stay with this, because what unfolds next will make it unmistakably clear why this season required patience, restraint, and trust above all else. As this unfolds, one of three things will happen, and none of them will be accidental. Separation, exposure, or restoration are not random outcomes. They are responses. They are heaven's way of restoring order after misalignment has been revealed. What you must understand is that not every situation resolves the same way because not every heart responds the same way. God does not force uniform endings. He releases fitting ones. Separation is often the quietest outcome, but it is also one of the most misunderstood. Separation does not always mean dramatic endings, arguments, or clear goodbyes. Sometimes it looks like distance forming naturally. Conversations fade. Access reduces. Influence weakens. What once felt close no longer feels aligned. This is not loss. It is protection. When separation is divinely led, it brings peace instead of grief. You may miss familiarity, but you do not miss clarity. And that distinction matters. Heaven allows separation when alignment cannot be restored without harm. God does not require you to maintain closeness with someone whose presence consistently disrupts your peace or compromises your discernment. Separation is not punishment for them, and it is not failure for you. It is an adjustment. It allows both parties to grow without causing further spiritual friction. When separation is the outcome, it creates room for healthier connections to emerge later. Exposure is another possible outcome, but exposure in God's hands is very different from exposure driven by emotion. Divine exposure does not aim to shame. It aims to reveal truth so order can be restored. When exposure happens, it often occurs naturally. Patterns become visible. Words contradict actions. Motives surface without accusation. You do not have to point anything out. Truth speaks for itself when timing is right. If exposure occurs, it will not require your defense. You will not need to explain your side repeatedly. God handles exposure in a way that preserves your integrity. Others may begin to see what you sensed quietly, and when that happens, the burden lifts from you. You are no longer carrying confusion alone. Clarity becomes shared, and peace follows. However, exposure is not guaranteed in every situation, and that does not mean justice failed. Sometimes God chooses correction over revelation. Sometimes He chooses distance over disclosure. Exposure is used when it serves healing, not when it creates unnecessary damage. Trust that if exposure is needed, it will come without your interference. The third possible outcome is restoration, and this one requires humility on both sides. Restoration does not mean returning to what was. It means building something new on corrected ground. Restoration only happens when there is genuine repentance, accountability, and change. It cannot exist where denial remains. If restoration is the outcome, it will not feel rushed. It will feel careful, honest, and slower than before. Restoration also does not mean full access is immediately restored. Boundaries remain. Wisdom leads. Trust is rebuilt gradually. If God allows restoration, it is because alignment has been re-established, not because conflict was ignored. Restoration is never God asking you to tolerate harm. It is God allowing healing where growth is possible. You may be wondering which of these outcomes will apply to your situation. The truth is, you do not need to decide. Heaven already knows. The outcome will be revealed through peace, not pressure. You will feel clarity about which direction is unfolding without having to force a conclusion. God does not confuse His children about next steps when they remain aligned. What matters most in this part of the journey is that you do not cling to a preferred outcome. Clinging creates resistance. Trust creates flow. Whether the outcome is separation, exposure, or restoration, the goal is the same: restored order. And restored order always brings relief, even if it arrives differently than expected. It is also important to release the idea that one outcome is more spiritual than another. Separation can be holy. Exposure can be merciful. Restoration can be redemptive. God uses all three. What determines which one manifests is not your desire, but the response of all hearts involved. You are responsible for yours. God handles the rest. As this process continues, you may notice your emotions settling. What once felt heavy begins to feel manageable. Thoughts become clearer. Prayer becomes calmer. These are signs that resolution is approaching. Not because everything is finished, but because alignment is holding. This part of the journey is about letting go of control over how things end. Endings do not define your worth. Responses do. You have already demonstrated restraint, faith, and trust. That matters more than any final outcome. As this part closes, remember this. No matter which of these paths unfolds, you are not losing anything meant for you. What remains will be aligned. What leaves will no longer drain you. And what is restored will be healthier than before. Heaven is not dismantling your life. It is refining it, carefully and intentionally, so that what comes next is built on peace rather than confusion. Now that clarity has been established, protection reinforced, and outcome set into motion, Archangel Michael delivers a prophetic instruction. This instruction is not complicated, but it is precise. It is not loud, but it is authoritative. And it is not optional if you want the season to close cleanly. Divine instruction often arrives after understanding, not before it, because obedience requires clarity. The instruction begins with this: remain still in spirit, even if life around you feels active. Stillness does not mean disengagement. It means inner quiet. It means refusing to let your thoughts spiral, your emotions rehearse pain, or your mind revisit conversations that no longer need your attention. Stillness is a form of discipline. It tells the spiritual realm that you are no longer available for confusion. The next instruction is to guard your mouth. This does not mean suppressing truth or living in fear of speaking. It means being intentional. Words spoken in this season carry more weight than usual. Casual venting can reopen doors that God is in the process of closing. Explanation can invite unnecessary opinion. Silence, when guided by wisdom, protects momentum. Speak only what is necessary, prayerful, and aligned. Another instruction is to realign your focus. Do not let this situation become the center of your emotional or mental energy. What you focus on feeds. What you release weakens. Shift your attention back to what God has already placed in your hands. Your growth, your calling, your responsibilities, your peace. When focus realigns, influence shifts. This is how spiritual authority is reclaimed fully. You are also instructed to forgive fully, but not superficially. Forgiveness in this season is not a statement. It is a decision reinforced daily. It means refusing to rehearse the offense. It means releasing the desire to be understood by those who are unwilling to understand. Forgiveness clears your spiritual space so that resolution does not arrive contaminated by resentment. Another part of the instruction is to establish or reinforce boundaries without guilt. Boundaries are not walls. They are guidelines for access. You are not required to explain every boundary you set. Boundaries rooted in discernment do not need validation. Heaven honors boundaries because they preserve order. Where boundaries exist, confusion loses access. You are also instructed to pray differently now. This is not a season for defensive prayer or repeated requests for the same answer. This is a season for surrendering prayer. Short prayers. Honest prayers. Prayers that release outcomes instead of managing them. God, I trust you with this carries more authority now than long explanations ever could. Another instruction is to resist the urge to seek confirmation from people. Human confirmation can delay divine peace. Too many voices blur discernment. God has already confirmed what you need to know through clarity, peace, and timing. Trust that. Seeking excessive reassurance often indicates fear, not wisdom. Return to what you already know in your spirit. You are also instructed to rest intentionally. Spiritual processes require energy, even when nothing appears to be happening externally. Fatigue can lower discernment and weaken restraint. Rest is not avoidance, it is maintenance. When you rest, you signal trust. You declare that you believe God is working even when you are not actively involved. Another important instruction is to prepare for movement. Resolution creates momentum. Once the situation fully settles, something new will require your attention. Do not rush toward it yet, but remain open. Preparation does not mean planning obsessively. It means staying flexible, available, and obedient. When the next door opens, clarity will accompany it. You are also instructed not to revisit the past once closure comes. Closure does not always look like conversation or apology. Sometimes it looks like peace that no longer requires explanation. When closure arrives, accept it fully. Do not reopen chapters God has already sealed. Revisiting what has been resolved weakens confidence and reintroduces doubt. Finally, you are instructed to trust the process without monitoring it constantly. Trust does not check progress daily. It rests in confidence. God does not need supervision. He needs cooperation. And cooperation looks like obedience, patience, and peace. This prophetic instruction is not meant to burden you. It is meant to free you. You are not being asked to carry more. You are being asked to release more. Release control. Release explanation. Release emotional attachment to outcomes. In doing so, you make room for God to complete His work without resistance. As this part closes, understand this clearly. You have been given everything you need to move forward wisely. You are not missing information. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be. Obey what hath been revealed. Trust what hath been promised, and allow what is unfolding to complete its purpose. What remains will be peace, clarity, and readiness for what comes next. As this message reaches its close, it is important that you do not carry it with heaviness, but with assurance. Nothing you have heard was meant to burden you. It was meant to steady you. Heaven did not reveal this moment to unsettle your heart, but to anchor it. What was hidden has now been acknowledged. What was misaligned had been addressed. And what felt uncertain is now being guided toward resolution. You must know this clearly. You were never unprotected. Even in the moments when you felt unsure, confused, or emotionally tired, protection did not lift. Heaven does not abandon its watch halfway through a process. What began with awareness is ending with assurance. And assurance is one of the greatest gifts God gives His people when a season is closing. Nothing that happened caught God by surprise. Nothing that was attempted had the power to override what He has ordained for you. Even the situation, uncomfortable as it was, has been folded into your growth. You did not lose ground. You gained discernment. You did not lose peace permanently. You learned how to guard it. These are not small victories. They are foundational ones. Heaven saw everything, every intention, every word spoken quietly, every thought nurtured in secret. And heaven also saw your restraint, your patience, your willingness to trust God even when clarity came slowly. That matters more than you realize. Many people ask God for elevation without realizing that elevation requires refinement. What you just walked through was refinement, and refinement always precedes increase. As this chapter closes, there is a gentle but firm reassurance being released over you. You are safe to move forward. You are not being asked to look over your shoulder. You are not being asked to remain guarded in fear. You are being invited to walk lighter. What needed to be handled hath been handled. What needed to be seen have been seen. And what needed to shift has already begun shifting. There is also reassurance about your heart. If you worried that this situation changed you in ways you did not want, hear this. Wisdom hath been added, not hardness. Discernment hath been sharpened, not suspicion. You are not less open, you are more aware. And awareness, when paired with love, produces peace instead of fear. God is not removing your compassion. He is refining it. He is teaching you how to love without losing yourself, how to trust without abandoning wisdom, and how to stay open without becoming unguarded. These lessons will serve you long after this situation is forgotten. As you move forward, expect calm. Expect emotional steadiness. Expect clarity to replace overthinking. These are signs that alignment hath been restored. When the soul is aligned, it no longer needs constant reassurance. Peace becomes the confirmation. You may also notice that conversations, decisions, and opportunities begin to feel easier. That is not coincidence. That is resistance lifting. When spiritual interference loses access, life regains flow. Do not be surprised if momentum returns quietly but consistently. God often restores gently, not dramatically. This is also a moment of gratitude, not because the situation was pleasant, but because it was purposeful. Gratitude seals lessons. It closes doors properly. When you thank God for guiding you through something difficult, you declare trust in His leadership. The declaration carries authority. As this message concludes, receive this final assurance. You are not walking into uncertainty. You are walking into clarity. You are not stepping into vulnerability. You are stepping into wisdom. And you are not alone. Heaven remains attentive, not because danger remains, but because destiny continues. Type "I am covered" in the comments if this message has brought you peace. Blessing code 111 is now activated. As this word settles into your spirit, hear this final call with clarity and purpose. What you receive today was not just for you. It is manna meant to be shared, light meant to travel, truth meant to reach others before confusion takes root. The Spirit says those who guard the flame must also fuel it. I am speaking directly to those whose hearts are stirred right now. This is your moment to act in obedience. When you give through super thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are sowing into the spreading of God's word across lives that need protection and clarity. Do it now through the links in the description or the PayPal QR code on the screen, and I declare that as you release this seed, heaven will release peace, covering, and increase back into your life, pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing.